Why aren't you eating dinner? My father-in-law asked, who we were seeing for the first time in a long time for New Year's. He must have noticed that there was only enough food at the dining room table for 3. It happens all the time. What? My father-in-law looked curiously across the table at my mother-in-law and husband. What exactly do you mean by it happens all the time? A daughter-in-law who can't give her mother-in-law grandchildren would have to be a slave, wouldn't she? While chewing on the hamburger steak I had made, my mother-in-law responded as if it were second nature. That's right, Ruby is our slave. She stays in the kitchen to take care of us while we eat. My husband sipped his beer loudly and said this in the same tone as his mother, as expected. He took me to his mother's every weekend to help her with housework. Even though you couldn't give her grandchildren, I'm letting you stay here. You should appreciate her and do the best you can for my mom. I didn't want to go to my in-laws' house, but I had made a commitment. Even if I refused to go, my husband would verbally force me. He knows I have a short temper and difficulty finding my words. Mom, I brought a slave. He even greeted me that way recently. What are you talking about? My father-in-law seemed offended by the way my mother-in-law and husband referred to me as a slave. That's a normal family with children. Ruby's infertility took the possibility of grandchildren away from me. Ruby, it's not your fault. You should stop bullying her. What do you mean? You're the one that lives so far away, so stay out of the problem. That's right, Dad. Don't tell me what to do. You didn't have to watch Mom lose the possibility of having grandchildren. In rebuttal, my mother-in-law and my husband sounded like they were mocking my father-in-law. I tossed the coffee beans in the grinder while listening to their conversation. My mother-in-law and husband always ordered me to bring them coffee as soon as they finished eating. I was so busy with shopping for my mother-in-law that I only had time to eat a piece of sweetbread earlier. Come on, I'm hungry too. I'm not sure what I'm doing. As if escaping from the grinder's blade, a single coffee bean fell to the floor. My name is Ruby, and I'm a 37-year-old housewife. During the weekday lunch hours, I work part-time in the kitchen of a family restaurant. My husband and I rent an apartment. I used to work at the same local bank as my husband, but I left 3 years ago. I quit to focus on fertility treatment. We were unable to have children, so we sought medical attention and were told that the problem was on my side. After a year of treatment, I was told that it is impossible for me to get pregnant. My mother-in-law and husband changed shortly after that. Originally, we were both working and managing our own income and budgets. When I quit my job, my husband was responsible for my living expenses. He took over our savings and the bills for rent and insurance, and he started giving me money for living expenses. At first, we were able to live comfortably on $1,000 a month. However, since we don't have fertility treatments anymore, you can save money. These were the first words out of my husband's mouth when we decided to give up on trying to conceive. What? Because of the financial burden of the treatment, I've been giving you more money for living expenses, but you don't need it anymore. You can go back to work if you want. True to his word, he cut back and gave me $800, then $600, even $500 a month. Of course, there was a time when I was desperately trying to find work. My mother-in-law, of all people, got in the way of that. Working as a full-time employee is not good for a wife. She will tell you that if you don't share the housework, she will divorce you. So you're saying I shouldn't work? Of course, if it's only part-time, then fine. You need to devote yourself to Carl and serve me. You can't even have grandchildren, so it's the least you can do. Is it really so bad that I can't have children? Despite going through painful treatments, I was unable to have a child. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, changed her mind about me. My bathroom is filthy, so please come and clean it. Drive me because I'm going out to dinner with a friend. She frequently called and asked me to run errands. To top it all off, I work every weekend at my in-laws' house. Plus, no matter what I did, all she did was complain. Why are you folding laundry like that? Why not put the corners together and fold it correctly and neatly? Do it again. My mother-in-law once threw the folded laundry onto the floor. She seemed to enjoy hurting me. I'm going out for a drink. Do you want to join me? My father-in-law asked after dinner. If you don't want to, you don't need to. I was just thinking about what happened during dinner. You've been treated so badly by Elizabeth and Carl. His words pulled on my heart. I automatically started to cry. I saw that, and if you want, you can vent to me. My father-in-law took me to a local bar. It was small, but clean and cozy. We sat at a table across from each other. He ordered a beer, and I ordered a whiskey soda. We ordered mixed nuts and a salad. At the dinner table, I could tell Elizabeth and Carl were being rude to you. My father-in-law began to speak after taking a sip of beer. I've been treated badly since I gave up fertility treatment. My father-in-law listened to me tell him about how his wife and son have treated me. I'm blamed for not being able to have children and am forced to run errands. I told him my husband wouldn't let me work full-time. He's reduced my living expenses after stopping fertility treatments, and now he only gives me $500 a month. What I hate most is being called a slave. Elizabeth is not happy unless she gets her way. Yeah, I know. She wasn't like this before, but she became selfish after having Carl. She would yell at me so much that I began to dislike her, and now we pretend to be a happy couple. Do you think it's because he doesn't want to be with me? I'm jealous my father-in-law has a place to escape to. You're not tough enough to make yourself heard. Yeah, but venting to you makes me feel better. Good, that makes me happy. Before leaving the restaurant, my father-in-law and I had one more beer and one more whiskey soda. However, a situation came up right after that. I'm back. My mother-in-law and husband were standing there when I opened the door. Dad, did you have a night out with my wife? My husband says this while looking at both of us. What? I just invited Ruby for a drink. What kind of relationship is this that you can go out for drinks together? My mother-in-law looked mad. What kind of, just like your husband said. What are you thinking, Ruby? Isn't it wrong for a wife to go to a bar with a man? You can't give me grandchildren, but you still have desires. My husband and mother-in-law both pointed at me. Enough! A powerful voice echoed throughout the area as if thunder had struck. My father-in-law was enraged, staring at Carl and Elizabeth. He blew up. What is it with you? Desire? All I wanted was for Ruby to relax. The rage sped up my heart rate. Mild-mannered people can become more difficult to deal with when angered. Elizabeth. When she heard her name called, my mother-in-law shuddered. She must be scared of him. Or maybe she had something to hide. You said, what kind of relationship do you have with your father-in-law that you go out drinking together? My daughter-in-law is treated like a slave, and I took her to get her mind off it. That's what happened. Because of Ruby, I can't have grandchildren. How can you say that when you hate children? What? Those words made me want to yell. My mother-in-law always blamed me for not giving her grandkids. Well, grandchildren are different than other children, aren't they? That said, I don't think you wanted grandchildren enough to treat Ruby like this. You're just making an excuse to point the finger at her. My mother-in-law looked like she was about to say something to my father-in-law, but quickly averted her gaze. Did she have nothing to say back? Or was she afraid of her husband? Carl. Wait, what? I heard you only give Ruby $500 a month for living expenses. Do you keep the rest of your salary? No, I pay rent and insurance. Even so, I don't think that's all of your salary. My husband turned his head and bit his lower lip. He couldn't think of a quick excuse. I came here to discuss our future. Let's get right to it. My father-in-law led us to the living room. What do you mean, discuss our future? Just sit down. Make some coffee first, Ruby. Don't tell her what to do. My father-in-law yelled, and my mother-in-law shuddered again. Make coffee for us, and a cup for Ruby, too. My mother-in-law nodded and sat meekly in her chair. My husband took a seat beside her. I sat on a chair further away from the table. I'll be retired in a few years. After my current assignment ends, I won't be living with you anymore. My father-in-law, still standing, started to speak. What? What exactly do you mean? Elizabeth and Carl's voices overlapped. Mr. Murphy looked at both of them. We've been masquerading as a couple for years, so we no longer need to live together. I'll live where I want, and you can stay here. That's fine. But I changed my mind after you accused me of being unfaithful earlier. I'm selling the house. Elizabeth, I'll leave you. No, where am I going to live? My mother-in-law, as expected, was surprised and stood up. Why don't you just get a place to live? How am I going to do that? I can't pay the rent. Get Carl to help you. He only gives her $500 a month. I'm sure he can pay for you. That's not possible. When asked to handle things financially, Carl stood up and waved his hands. He must have been nervous because he was wobbling. "We don't have any money. If I do that, I won't be able to pay Mom's debt." Elizabeth gasped. My husband swallowed his words. "But I for sure heard that Elizabeth has debt. Was she in debt?" "You just mentioned debt, didn't you?" My father-in-law exclaimed, even more horrified. "Elizabeth and Carl, what exactly do you mean by debt? Explain." "I didn't mean what I said." "I said explain." My mother-in-law burst into tears when she heard her husband's angry voice. But his rage didn't fade. "Mom owes me $50,000. I'm her co-signer." With a resigned expression on his face, my husband began to speak. "Around the time we stopped fertility treatment, Mom made an investment. She made some money at first, but the stock market crashed." "You mean you lost money in the stock market and went into debt?" "I used family funds. At the time, we were put onto stocks that would go up, but eventually we got into debt. But now I'm paying it with my salary, and Mom is repaying it by working part-time at a supermarket." This was news to me. I had never heard anything about any stocks or debt. My mother-in-law had lost a lot of money in the stock market and had borrowed money to make up for it when I stopped fertility treatment. She must have tried to pay back the debt by buying stocks that were supposed to go up. But as they were both repaying debt, that stock didn't go up either. Maybe, I couldn't help but say the first thing that popped into my mind. "That's also when you and Carl began treating me like a slave." "Ruby, what are you trying to say?" "Were you just taking it out on me? The slave treatment started around the time I stopped fertility treatments. I doubt that it's because she wanted a grandchild so badly, but the simple answer is that she was taking it out on me because that was satisfying." My mother-in-law stayed silent as expected. "And Carl used the money that he took out of my monthly expenses to pay off his debts. He can save money because there's no fertility treatment. He didn't give me less money for some strange unknown reason. He just needed the money to repay his mom's debt." "You stupid idiot." Finally, my father-in-law blew up. "Even if it's family money, it's money I worked for and saved. You put it in stocks without consulting me. To top it all off, you lost it. What the hell kind of money are you spending?" After saying this, my father-in-law suddenly left the room as if he had thought of something. He looked like he was going to the second floor. We all followed him. "What are you doing, Dad?" "Show me Elizabeth's stuff. I'll check what she's buying." "Stop!" She cried and screamed, but her husband didn't care. "Stop it!" Her husband opened the closet door as she yelled. The first thing that caught my eye was a luxury handbag. With just a quick glance, you could see at least 10 of them. "Ruby, are these bags expensive?" "They're all luxury items, costing over $1,000. My father-in-law opened a small drawer in the corner of the closet. There was an array of accessories, rings, necklaces, and earrings. Some of them had diamonds, rubies, and other precious stones on them. I picked up the ring and looked at the inside. I found an engraving of K18, indicating it was made of 18-karat gold. "Elizabeth, you bought all these expensive things without telling me?" "I'm sorry, but—" "Divorce." My father-in-law turned his eyes on my husband in disgust and he snapped. "All this spending, investing in stocks without my permission, and treating Ruby like a slave? Divorce. I want a divorce. I won't take no for an answer." "Then how am I supposed to live?" "Talk to Carl. I'll sell this house and land immediately. You can sell these bags and jewelry to pay for the move." My mother-in-law couldn't say anything back. My husband was nodding his head and biting his lip. He no longer had the arrogant and domineering demeanor that he had when he treated me like a slave, like it was a lie. The next day, my father-in-law got 2 sets of divorce papers. "Here, Ruby, if you want to file for divorce too," my father-in-law said as he handed one to me. I looked at my husband, and he sighed and looked away from me. Of course I want a divorce, but more importantly, we want alimony from these people. I thought hard about this all night last night. How have I been suffering for so long? What do I want to do now? I really wanted to have a child. The fertility treatment was agonizing, but I endured it. But then I realized that I couldn't conceive. I continued my story, holding back the tears in my eyes. All the painful tests and treatments I went through to become a mother were all for nothing. I can't have a baby no matter how I try. As I was grieving, Carl told me that since I didn't need fertility treatment, he would reduce my living expenses. "What? Are you saying this is all Carl's fault?" "Shut up, Elizabeth." My father-in-law was horrified. and my mother-in-law immediately stopped talking. My mother-in-law blamed me for not giving her a grandchild, and then she treated me like a slave. Do you know how hard it was for me? Naturally, there was no way Elizabeth or Carl would respond. But in the end, Carl just needed money to pay off his debts. For Elizabeth, it was just an outlet for the stress of losing so much money in the stock market. I want you to reimburse me for this. What if I say I won't pay? Sure, I'll talk to my lawyer. My husband put his palm to his forehead and fell silent. After the new year, my father-in-law officially divorced my mother-in-law. When he put his house on the market, he found a buyer within a few days. Someone was just looking for land to build a house in that area, so they decided to tear down the old house and clear the land before selling it. Having no place to stay, my mother-in-law moved into a rundown apartment that looked like it would cave in from a gentle breeze. She now lives with my ex-husband. In addition to their living costs, they have to pay off their debt and alimony to me, which I'm sure is very difficult for them financially. My mother-in-law is working at a supermarket during the day and a part-time job at a pub at night. My husband also works a second job on the weekends at a wedding hall in addition to his company job. They complain to everyone around them that it's hard to pay their debt and alimony while watching others become happy. Meanwhile, I moved into a beautiful little apartment and got a job through my father-in-law. It was a clerical job at a security company. He said I could use my knowledge of accounting and my skills from working at a bank. I want you to be happy. If you ever need help, just tell me anything. My father-in-law is on my side, and I will do my best in this new chapter to reassure him. And this time, I will shine on my own. The morning of my first day at work, I put on a new suit and made a promise to myself.